Hey everybody, welcome to Hills and Gills. If you're new to the channel, my name is Chuck. I want to thank everybody for stopping by and been checking our videos out on some of our favorite jig patterns. And today we're going to be tying a killer jig up for those smallmouth bass. Whether you fish those deep pockets in the river or at the lake, this is a 1/4 ounce with a #1 hook on it. And it's out of nothing more than a good old Appalachian Mountain, Eastern Kentucky roadkill squirrel tail. We always keep a knife with us, whether we're driving down the road and we see where someone had hit a deer or a squirrel. Will jump out. If it's not in bad shape, we'll cut that tail off, add some salt to it, leave it out in the sun for a few days. When it dries out, brush it out, and you can tie a ton of jigs out of one of these right here. Whether you tie 1/16 for like brim, a Popeye jig, whether you're tying an 1/8 ounce and a 1/4 ounce like we're tying today. And right here is a little Popeye jig I done tied up with it. Killer for those big brim, also those crappie. So if you're just getting into jig tying and you know someone at squirrel hunts, tell them save the tails for you. You can get a lot of jigs out of one of these. Or leave a knife in your vehicle when you're driving along. If you see a deer or a squirrel, get that tail off, add some salt to it, and you'll have plenty of nice hair to tie with. Now on to the jig right here, guys. 1/4 ounce, like I was saying, #1 sickle hook. Got a little bit of hackle feather on the back of it. I like that red collar on it. Now, one thing I like about squirrel tail, if you're familiar with like the spinner, the mounts, whatever you would like to call it, like the rooster tail, they're made out of that squirrel tail on the back of them too. And a squirrel tail, they don't really lose their shape when they hit the water. They stay kind of flare out. They're like a coarse hair, and it leaves a nice big body when you're popping it along, swimming it close to the bottom, bouncing it off the bottom. We're going to be using this one for right here, and the smallmouth will kill it. Just a natural look, no flash to it, simple tie. So let's get ready to tie the roadkill squirrel tail jig. Okay, guys, we're getting ready to get this tied up here. Again, this is a 1/4 ounce jig head that we poured. And if you want to know how we paint up our jig heads, we've got a link right down in the description, a good informal type step-by-step how we do all of our jig heads. And I've got that right down there for you just to check out after this video if you'd like to. And this is on a #1 sickle type hook, my favorite type of jig hooks. Now we're going to be using a Do It Red A thread. I like a red collar on my jigs. I use a lot of different colors, but red is one of my go-to colors. We're going to go right down to the bend of the hook, and we're going to back up about 1/4 of a way on this right here. And the next thing we're going to be adding a black hackle feather for the tail. Now you can go with a like a green, you could go with like a gray, a white, and an orange, but I like black. You can even go with a grub, like a black curly tail, if you choose to do that. But if you're going to go with a hackle feather, I like letting it stick back about 1.5 inches or so off the back of the bend of that hook. So we'll just go ahead here and get this cut. And we'll remove some of the feathers off of it right here, exposing that stem. We don't have to remove all of it, just enough to get right up on the shank of that hook there. That looks pretty good. So we're going to go ahead and get this locked down. We want it to be right on top the shank of that hook, just like so. And if it tries to twist on you, you can work with it, kind of straighten it up a little bit. And then we're going to put some nice tight wraps up and down this. This is a smallmouth jig. This would be excellent for those big brown trout too. So we're going to put some nice tight wraps down this and bring it right back up to right behind the jig head right here. Now next, we're going to be adding our squirrel tail right here. Now with a squirrel tail, when I'm using them, I like using the lower end of it. This is great for like smaller jigs, Popeye jigs, 1/8 and 1/16 type jigs. But if you come right up here to the top of it, you have got some longer hairs you can see right here, right off the base of that tail stem. So it ain't going to take much for this #1 hook here. We're just going to pinch this off a small pinch Kind of gather it up. It's very flexible, so you can work with it and pretty much measure it right on the stem, right on that squirrel tail stem there that's holding that hair on. So right there looks pretty good. We're just going to go ahead and get this cut off. Now when we want to get it cut, we'll remove some of that loose hair. Right there is what we're looking for. It's got the gray, the brown, the black in it. Nice color pattern right there off of a squirrel tail. And then we're just going to lay him down right there. Make sure, give him one more good measure there. I want to cut him just a little bit more, allowing that hackle tail to be able to be exposed good, to give it that nice tail action when you're working it across the bottom. Right there looks good. Clean the front of it up here a little bit. Now we're going to lay it right on behind the jig head right here. And we're going to give him a couple of tight wraps here. Locking him in. Now when we get a few wraps in it, we're just going to start working it around the shank of that hook. We want every bit of the shank covered with this hair right here. So we'll just push down, kindly pushing forward a little bit, keeping that collar intact. And I always like turning my jig around, making sure I've got it good. That looks good. And now we're going to go ahead and give some tight wraps right up toward the back of that jig head. Now when we once get done with that, the next thing we want to add, guys, you can go with like different colors when it comes to flash, but I want to keep this natural. I want to keep everything as natural as possible, and I'm going to go with some black flashing right here. And I'm going to get about 4 or 5 strands for this tie right here, maybe 6. We'll go ahead and get him cut. And you want to have him flushed up. I love it the same length on one side. Then I'm just going to turn my jig over, and I want this to go right back to where that hair ends. And then I'm just going to give him a couple of wraps, locking him into place there. Now when I want to get that locked in, I'm going to go ahead and cut this excess off here. And then I'm just going to flip it over, and I'm just going to go right back to the other side. And I'm going to repeat the same process right here. I'm going to lay it right back to the back, eyeball it, get it the same length as the other. Give it a nice couple tight wraps there. There we go, it looks good. And then we're going to go ahead and take its excess, and we're going to cut and just remove all of that. Now the last thing we got to do, guys, is we just got to tie this in. There we go, it looks pretty good. A couple more tight wraps just to be doing it. Now on a smallmouth jig or any kind of jig over the size of a crappie, I like doing 5 plus 5 on the whipping. 5 or 6, that is. I do lose count sometime, but that's no problem. And then I'll do 5 more. There we go. Then I'll wrap it around my finger, not to break it, just to seat it in good. Get it cut. And last but not least, if you've watched any of my other videos, you know I love my super glue when it comes to doing that finishing touch on the collar. I'll add a nice drop to it there. That's going to give it a nice shiny look. Plus, that's going to lock in that thread on that collar, and it is not going to go anywhere. There you go, the little 1/4 ounce squirrel tail bottom bouncing jig. A simple tie, but a deadly tie. And if you enjoy the video, I hope you give us a thumbs up. Subscribe to our channel if you're not subscribed. We got a lot of fishing coming down the line, more jig making. Plus, down in the description guide, we got a link to our playlist to all of our other jigs that we've tied so far, plus how we paint up our jig heads. And follow us over on Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok. Until next time, stay safe out there on the water, and we'll see you right back here at Hills and Gills.